Welcome to From Skills to Success. We've got an action-packed hour to spend with you, filled with lots of great research and insights. We're going to go ahead and get started. Our topic today is brought to you by PwC and Eightfold. And we're going to talk to you about technology and innovation and how that really comes into play, not just to help you reach your objectives, but also to transform the employee experience. So really excited, and we're going to go ahead and jump in. So my name is Andrea Shah. I'm the head of talent strategy and transformation at Eightfold. I joined Eightfold about 2 years ago. Prior to that, I had a 25-year career at American Express, where I launched a lot of transformations, including Eightfold. So I'm excited today to talk to you more about Eightfold and a lot of what I've learned. And with that, I'll also hand it over to Anthony to introduce yourself.
Thanks, Andrea, and good morning, good afternoon to everyone joining us today. My name is Anthony Abatello. I am a partner at PwC, and I have the fortunate responsibility of leading our human capital consulting business. We affectionately call it workforce transformation. I have spent all of my career, about 3 decades, all in consulting around talent, leadership, and human resources. And that's been in a myriad of serving clients and also researching and developing innovative solutions to solve our clients' most pressing issues around their workforce. And excited to be here with you all today, sharing a topic that is extremely important, but also one that I am very passionate about and have enjoyed working with our friends at Eightfold AI to really dive into the data and see how skills are impacting the employee experience and ultimately the success of the workforce in today's post-COVID environment.
Yeah, no, that's great. So our objectives today, we've got a lot we're going to cover, but starting with just helping you see and understand the expectations employees have. I think Anthony will share some really great insights from PwC research to help you understand what employees are expecting. We're going to talk about how organizations can create this culture of continuous learning for their employees and how to make it really personalized and employee-driven. We'll talk about the role of talent intelligence. I'll give you a 101 on how intelligence comes into play. And then you'll also walk away some great insights on really how do you kind of create that high-performing workforce that's ready for the future and why it's so critical. So with that, we'll go ahead and get started. I'll hand it over to you, Anthony.
Great. Thanks, Andrea. So, really what we're seeing is now this focus on employee experience and skills is really driving overall productivity and performance of client organizations. When you look at the rapid pace of change in business models that are impacting the overall employee experience and the fact that a poor experience leads to poor business performance and productivity, you could see that this is a tremendous opportunity for organizations to really change and focus on the experience. So a couple points here to note that we've seen in our research. 40% of CEOs recently responded that they don't believe that their companies are economically viable in a decade from now, which is really a sobering fact. And if continued on the same course, the U.S. is expected to lose about 8.5 trillion in unrealized revenue due to skills and talent shortages by 2030. And our surveys show that half of employees in the workforce would leave their job just to learn new skills. This idea of the haves and the have-nots when it comes to skills, that skills are the new currency, and really what we're seeing as the main driver of productivity and performance for our client organizations. I guess, Andrea, when you're thinking about from your perspective where you sit, what are you hearing from the Eightfold customers on why the employee experience is critical to the success of their organization?
Yeah, I mean, I think a big part of what they're trying to drive, when you have skills intelligence, is really the transparency and the empowerment of employees. I think when you empower your employees to really understand their skills, understand their future opportunities, or even their next move, right? When you empower them to really drive that, that's how you drive their engagement. and that includes their upskilling. And so I think that's a lot of what we're hearing. They really want to kind of find a way to give transparency and empower their employees. And that's what employees are looking for.
It's, when you think about it, it's, this point on our next page here is really about, they're seeking it and it's driving retention and attraction of the organization. So what we've seen is, the skills-based organizations are increasingly sought out by top talent. So those that have those skills, but also those that want to continue to hone the craft and their skills. So this focus of moving away from traditional career paths and more into transferable skills, and how we can develop those transferable skills that can provide mobility across the organization is what's key. Our recent hopes and fears research found that 25% of employees are likely to leave their organization in 12 months, a third of Gen Zs and millennials. So when you think about that fact as well, right, this whole idea of the Great Resignation is not over. Upskilling and reskilling are the best paths to have employees develop new skills and organizational agility. And so, if you marry that desire and that need for business performance with the investment that organizations are making, there's a huge gap between that desire and what will drive the performance and the level of investment that organizations are really making today.
I completely agree with you, Anthony. I think one of the things I'll share a little bit is how fast things are changing in the world right now. And in particular with skills, how fast things are evolving with skills that are really needed. And so employees are looking for their employers to help them, become ready for the future and become relevant for the future. And so I think that becomes really vital. Absolutely.
Which is a perfect segue into our first poll for the day, which we can move to. So the poll here is, where is your organization on its journey to becoming more skills focused? So while we wait for you all to respond, Andrea, what's your thoughts on how organizations get the insights they need to move to a skills-focused organization?
Yeah, well, I think there is a lot of resources available, right? Obviously, this research you just shared with us is very valuable for, I think, organizations to understand what their employees are expecting. But there's just a lot of information that's available now. I think if you look at all the different forums that are available, like HR Tech, there's a lot of conversations that are happening now around transformation. I think the question is no longer if, a company is going to lead transformation in their organization and their capabilities with their human resources. It's more how. Right. That's more of the questions that people are asking. And I think there's just a lot of resources available from research like PwC or even other kind of trade forums to attend. So definitely very important time now to learn as much as you can and ask those questions.
And I just, as a point of logistics, you can actually click on your screen to select your answer. I know some people were using in the chat their answer, but if you want to just click on the screen, and then we'll give it another second here to compile.
Yeah.
And Andrew, I agree. I think getting that insight, really starting with an understanding of, the talent that you have within your organization, just, what's the skills that people have. And most business leaders today know the outcomes they're looking to achieve, and just understand, knowing what the key skills will be for them.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think that's a lot of questions. Unfortunately, I don't think a lot of leaders have that transparency into their organization. So that is just a very big question. As you said, that is a great first step. What skills do I have? And then followed by, what skills do I need? That thinking becomes really important, and understanding what's happening, in the market is really important. So totally agree. That's a really important first step. Okay.
All right, shall we close?
Okay, so let's see. Should we take a look? I think I need a
Yeah.
drum roll. Um, thank you, Anthony. Another skill you have there. You know. Okay, so it looks like really interesting results. Not surprising. There's the biggest group is organizations are starting to explore the opportunity. And then followed by they're actually starting to plan and transition to being more skill based, which is
Mhm.
exciting. And then I think there's a good percentage here, even in the first category, of not really understanding the value prop. And so I know we're having a lot of discussions on just kind of very basic explanations. And I think we'll actually spend some time today to kind of hopefully take this group from the 11.4% to um, hopefully starting to explore.
Yeah, exactly.
Great. This is really interesting to see. Okay. So I'm going to just jump in really quickly because I'm going to share with you a little bit more about intelligence and how it works with your employee experience. But before I do that, I think it's really important for me to share a little bit about kind of where the intelligence comes from and how it works. And in particular, with obviously with Eightfold, because I will also share with you some of the data that you'll be able to get some insights on. But starting with this page, three things to walk away with on how skills intelligence works with Eightfold is number one, we have a gigantic data set that we get from all publicly available sources. We have about the equivalent of half the world's workforce worth of data, and that's data on jobs, skills required for those jobs, and how individuals acquire their skills as they move through jobs. Really deep data sets. Some of it comes from job boards, some of it is census data. There's just a lot of different data sources, and some of the data we might purchase. So publicly available data. The second point here is we take that publicly available data and all the information that we have on skills and skills relate to jobs, and we integrate that intelligence into our customers' enterprise HR systems, right? And what we end up doing is bringing to life the skills that employees have or bringing to life the skills that candidates have, right? So in your existing database, any information that you have on employees and their roles over time and their skills, or any information you have on candidates in your ATS platform, all of a sudden you're able to understand what skills they have using the intelligence that Eightfold brings. Um, and then the key point here, the third point is really, the magic happens when you're able to understand their skills and match them to the skills you need for jobs in the organization. When you have that matching capability, it kind of really unlocks all of your talent priorities. So that's a 101 on intelligence. Hopefully that's pretty straightforward. Going on to the next page, I want to just quickly jump to the overview and how does this affect the employee experience when you have this intelligence? There's four columns here. One around, getting at the current data on your employee skills. Anthony, to your point, understanding what skills your employees have is just one of the very first steps that you want to take.
Exactly.
There's another column around your ability to match to new roles. So employees and even candidates externally able to understand what roles they match to is really important. The third column is really around building skills for future roles. So your ability to learn and understand what you need to learn to move into future roles and having that ecosystem support you. And the fourth column is being able to monitor how is your organization doing in terms of growing their skills. And so when you can have each one of these areas of activities enabled, your experience really improves. So from the perspective of employees, being able to update their skills, I mean, that's one of the age-long challenges of HR is having employees keep their skills updated. And one of the things that's enabled when you have intelligence, skills intelligence, it's really easy to do. It's actually interesting to do because you can, Eightfold will recommend from the roles you've had, these are skills that we see that you're likely to have that you don't have on your list. Do you want to update it? So it's really interesting for them to see that. And if they can take that information and match to jobs, they're more likely to complete it, right? Because there's an end outcome for them, which is really a great way to really engage your employees and have them complete their profiles. We're seeing really high completion rates with our with our customers. In the second category on matching, it's really about employees being able to identify what roles they can move to next, and then even understand kind of what roles they can move to in the future. And then when they look at the third column in terms of building their skills for those future roles, they can understand what skills are needed. And then I think also have the ability to connect that with the learning courses, connect that with mentors, right? Who in the organization has similar skills and who's willing to be a mentor. And that's great because you break out of the mold of who do you know, who can you tap into that you know, you're able to look across the organization. And even projects. Are there projects that I can sign up for that help me also build these skills? So that's how you create this amazing experience to really supports your employees in both their movement immediately and their movement in the future and what learning they need to build. And then you can monitor it. And of course, as leaders, they have great experiences also and be able to support their employees in their mobility, but also understanding skills across the organizations that can help them fill roles. Any thoughts on this experience view, Anthony?
Yeah, no, I mean, it is, it really is at the core. What I see is, the skills piece get at the core of, transforming the employee experience overall, going through this and really using this, the having a skills ontology, mapping that architecture then into jobs, and then the downstream into compensation, salary, placement, development, just all get enabled from this as the core kernel. And oftentimes is the heaviest part for clients to really start on this process. The part I know some people were asking, like, what is a what does a typical skills transformation look like? It does vary, but I think all of them start with this at the beginning, at the core. We always say defining what is the work that people are doing and the skills that are needed. That's what really is there. That's what then can get us to, how are we looking at the culture? How are we looking at rewards, right? What is the type of, workspace, workplace that then we put around them? But having skills and understanding the work is the critical part of that journey overall.
I think I'm just seeing this other question here, a question on what is your average completion rate? And I believe that's talking about profile completion rates. We're seeing really strong completion rates. I think on average, we're seeing north of 70% completion rates. We just had one customer that launched Eightfold and had this great messaging around, we heard you want really support on your mobility and your development. And so we're providing you with this great new tool. Please complete your profiles. And we're seeing for them, they achieved 72% completion rate after a month. So really enviable numbers, right, to see. And again, it all has to do with when you complete your profile, you have the ability to understand what jobs you match to and what jobs you can move to in the future. So there has to be some like really strong outcome from that. I think that gets that to that type of completion rate. Okay, let's keep going because we got great information. On to our next question here that we'd love to hear from you about. How confident are you that your workforce has the skills needed to meet the needs of your business in the next 5 years? This is a great one. I'd love to chat with you a little bit about this, Anthony, because I think in terms of skills and how fast skills are changing, I think one of the things we're seeing, and I'm going to go into this in a second, is there's this amazing trend around digital skills that are cross industry. A lot of demand happening in that arena. I don't know if you're seeing any other areas of just really high skill demand that are coming up or big changes happening around skills.
Yeah, I think for the most part, I would say probably 80% of organizations that we work with are saying they don't even have an understanding of what the needs of their skills are for the next 5 years. You go back to that CEO point of 40% of CEOs saying their business model is not economically viable. So I think everybody is starting in a place where their level of confidence is quite low. I think many are. And the codifying of those skills are, it's clear. I think for the most part, Andrew, I completely agree with you. The digital skill set, that
Mhm.
broader skills continues to be a concern for every company that is trying to be a tech company today. And that's going to be things like data analysis, data science, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Engineering skills and programming languages. I think all of those are still very, skills that are continue to that are needed and are
Yeah.
critical. But just things like even on just customer empathy, problem solving, decision making, all of those that are around. The hard technical skills are there, but the softer skills are ones that companies are really needing to invest in to actually enable the business models that they're trying to reinvent today.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. I think there's just a lot of appetite for softer skills, and companies are trying to create cultures across their organization. So definitely really important. So let's go ahead and take a look at what our results look like. So the confidence is good.
Oh, there we are. Okay, well, that's actually not bad. You're
I
you're
know.
you're painting a more positive picture than the grim one that I was starting with.
Yeah, no, that's really great to see that it sounds like there's good confidence, and the somewhat confidence is the biggest category, with really the majority, 52.2% of the respondents. Um, and then 12.5% almost are very confident. And then in the middle is the next category, 22.5%. So really great confidence out there. I think there's a lot of awareness on skills and a lot of activity around trying to build the critical skills. My guess is, Anthony, probably what's coming up is the business is really pushing for these vital skills that they need into the future. I think what'll be great, what we'll talk about now is how that can be accelerated. Um,
Yeah.
yeah,
And
questions.
I think I noticed a question in the chat about do organizations often update their job architectures as part of this? Because I think it's here. Like if you have an understanding of the skills that are needed, yeah, what we see is this movement away from job architecture on an island and what we've termed talent architecture, which is the blend of a skills architecture to map with the job architecture, so that you're embedding skills as part of the entire job architecture, which then enables us to look at market analysis and competitive rates for compensation, salary, but also for learning, for development, for promotion, for mobility. So if you're looking at job architecture alone, as one of my fellow partners often reminds me, we get called in to fix clients that are doing job architecture alone and having to embed the skills piece.
Yeah.
And it takes them longer to do it from that angle. So, if you take one thing away from this discussion today, job architecture, skill architecture together, starting that journey together is critical to the success.
Absolutely. One add to that, that's exactly right, that I think is really interesting is we're talking to organizations, many organizations. I probably talk to 10 or 15 leaders a week, and we're talking about AI and how that enables skills AI and how that enables their talent priorities. Um, I'd say 90% of them, interestingly, are talking about job architecture and wanting to build skills into their architecture. So it is very foundational. And I think it's fascinating to me that this is coming up so frequently in the conversation. So to answer that question, when you think about architecture, it should be part of the overall skill strategy. And I'm seeing it coming up as such a hot topic right now. Okay, so let's continue to go. This is really helpful and insightful to hear these responses from the audience. I think what I wanted to do now is set a little bit of, I talked about kind of digital skills and the trends. Digital is one example that I'm seeing as like a big skill trend, and it's happening across all industries. But each industry on top of that has their own trend, right? If you think about the energy industry, they've got renewable energy, you've got um, 5G and telecom. You've got so many different trends that are happening out there. Biotech and pharmaceuticals, like each vertical has their own transformational trends with regards to skills, but then digital is happening across all industries. So I wanted to just take a lens on digital for a second and share a little bit of context on kind of why um, this impacts every aspect of your business and your ability to compete. And it affects every aspect of your performance, your cost, your efficiency, your customer experience, and your revenue growth is all impacted by digitization. And so skills required to enable digitization is really vital. And there's a lot of competition out there for these same skills. And so that's why you want to kind of really build kind of the skills focus into your organization and really help your employees build those skills because it's so competitive out there right now. I'm sure many of you know this in terms of acquiring digital skills. So here's an example. I've got 4 categories here: AI and big data, cloud computing, Internet of all things, and cybersecurity. So let's just take a look at one of them: AI and big data. The use cases of this in terms of what it enables are very large, everything from intelligent automation, fraud analytics, lead generation optimization. So revenue growth, cost efficiency, all of these things, doing everything bigger and better. You know, you can see too, the Internet of all things, it's demand-based pricing, digital customer experience, very important these days, digital products that you're creating. So you can see the extent of what digital skills drives across your organization is quite critical. And then what you see beneath that for each of these categories are what are the key skills that are we're seeing come up as kind of these rising skills for each of these categories. So for AI and big data, obviously machine learning, deep learning, algorithms, neural networks, Python is rising too as a skill for big data, TensorFlow, Internet of all things. You can see similarly to embedded system. I'm not a technical expert, but you can see these and obviously read for yourself. These are all the skills that we're seeing that are rising. And what we've done is we took a look across industries and what is the prevalence of these skills in the industries. And what you can see is that the readiness across industries to be able to compete and have sufficient skills, that's sufficient of these skills in each of these categories is mostly in the red.
Yeah.
I think, you know, it's really fascinating. And I think you'll see this, you know, as obviously out in the marketplace as you're competing for these type of skills. Does that sound familiar to you,
It
Anthony?
does certainly on, those, those tech skills where, where like as we were saying before, which, tend to be there is not, tremendous amount of maturity across organizations unless they were sort of, you know, digital native or, big tech. So certainly this, and I know you're going to get to it, but the staggering growth in the demand for these over time, and how that's changed is really unbelievable. So
Yeah.
it says we're starting in a place of not of weakness, and that gap is gonna continue to grow over time.
Yeah. And that's why upskilling is really important. Upskilling your
Yeah.
employee base is really crucial. Plus, you know, you've got in front of us this economic uncertainty. And I'm sure leaders are like, okay, you have limited ability to grow, you know, your workforce right now in this environment. And so the upskilling becomes crucial, especially when you take a look at these use cases. It's pretty incredible. I have a question here I want you to answer really quickly about is there a standard set of skills defined somewhere for us to use? What I'd say is one of the things about Eightfold that it really I think differentiates us is that you don't have to use the right word. We are not about word matching. We understand the relationship between different skills. And so we have the ability to say, okay, this skill is very closely related to this skill, and to make sure you kind of capture the matches of different candidates, whether internally or externally. I think that's really important because of the fact that everybody's using different language for skills. And sometimes they're skills, sometimes they're capabilities, sometimes they're leadership skills, as you were talking about earlier, Anthony. And so you want to have something that understands the relationship between all of that, because if you're looking at an external candidate, they're probably using very different language. If you establish a standard language for skills.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think, having the skill and the definition, I mean, obviously, working with different organizations, there are a lot, we've developed a skills framework because we wanted to be able to pull all from different sources to be able to work with, the different technologies, and so having the right definition and knowing what those, mean so that, the, data science and, cloud engineering and those skills that are all mean the same thing to everybody. But the beauty of having the advancements of technology and talent intelligence is, it's not just the word that we use; it's how they're describing and what the experience is, that really helps to get to the utilization of that skill.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so I'm going to continue to hammer on this topic of it's changing quickly. Here's an example of data scientists. And this is our data that we took a look at. This role, data science as a role, over the past 10 years has grown dramatically in terms of its prevalence. So how prevalent is a data scientist? Guess what? Today it's highly, highly prevalent as a role. And then taking a look on the right of that chart, you'll see what are the top rising skills in 2010 for a data scientist. And you can see in 2020, here are the top rising skills that we're seeing currently. And there's no overlap. Completely different skill sets. And you can see it's driven by, new technology, new approaches, new tools, just completely different world than 10 years ago. And we're seeing, and then if you look at the slope of the lines, you can see it's changing at a 3 to 5 year clip. So being very skills focused and really focused on building skills and understanding what emerging skills are kind of coming up is really important as you think about your organization and upskilling. And so I want to show you kind of what, if you've got that skill intelligence. And so let's say we have two examples here in front of us. One is a declining role, a systems analyst, and then the future role is a cloud engineer. No surprise, cloud engineers now are in high demand. If you have skills intelligence, you're able to understand, with the systems analyst role and a cloud engineer role, there's actually really high overlap of skills, right? The green boxes are direct skill overlap. The yellow boxes are related skill overlaps. So if I'm a systems analyst and I want to kind of grow my career and move in the direction of greater relevance, I guess, in terms of the prevalence of roles, I might want to move in the direction of a cloud engineer. And this way I know exactly what skills I need to develop. And I also know I have a lot of skills already that overlap with a cloud engineer. And so the so what from a employee experience is same view, but looking at what skills need to be developed. So if I'm that systems administrator, I can see I have a high overlap, as I said just now, with a cloud engineer. And here are the skills I need to build to move down the pathway of becoming a cloud engineer. And then if I look at the other options, I actually have different pathways I can take, right? And I have overlap with a business systems consultant. I have high overlap of skills with DevOps engineer. And I can see these are the skills I need to build. And I can choose my pathway. I think that is one of the most important things here is you're giving that transparency and therefore kind of the empowerment of your employees. And one quick example is I've taken a programming class before, and I've learned that I have really bad skills at programming. If you told me that I had to be a cloud engineer or a DevOps engineer, I might have to leave the organization. But if I look at the business systems consultant, kind of new skills required, process improvement, business analysis, strategic planning, that happens to be real areas of interest for me. And I would happily choose that pathway for development. So that's the power of empowering your employees. Great. So I'll hand it back to you about kind of the employee perspective and what PwC is seeing in your research.
Yeah. So if you look here on this slide, I see this certainly from our experience, and our recent hopes and fears study showed that employees view AI as an opportunity to learn new skills. Like they're not afraid of this taking over; they're actually asking for it. And quite honestly, what I've seen is a lot of I'm a older generation as a Gen Xer. I see a lot of those of us that are in leadership are the ones that are actually have this fear of the unknown around this technology and what it might do, whereas the younger generations really are embracing and have embraced this. Certainly the Gen Zs and the digital natives, they are really looking at this as an opportunity. It's clearly front and center right now, and it's already disrupting the job market. I mean, Eightfold has an entire business around this, and they're ready to embrace it. Right? They believe it will have a positive impact, and a third of our respondents, believe that it will enable them to learn new skills or create new job opportunities. So, that's a great great point of view. I think the next piece here just shows that,
Oops,
sorry,
I'm trying to help.
the that the employee base really recognize the need for upskilling. So there's this employee base that have specialist skills. They're more ready for reinvention, than those, without, and they recognize, the need for upskilling. This is this point of the haves and the have-nots. With specialized skills, they're more prepared for the rapid change in business models, and they recognize the need, for ongoing upskilling. It's not something that happens one period of time and then it's over. So this is, the time. The call to action is for organizations, for learning organizations, for HR departments to, look at the opportunity to tie their upskilling efforts to prepare their workforce for the future, including identifying and developing the skills for tomorrow. So, in the next 3 to 5 years. So, I think that, this is we recognize it as a need to enable the future growth of the business so that we are viable in the future. And now our workforce is telling us we also see this opportunity to grow, and we needed to have the resiliency to continue to support that change and growth.
Yeah, isn't it great? It's a coming together of the business objective and the human interest
Yes.
objective, right? Employees' needs and also the company's needs. Really great.
So
Okay, our next and last survey here is how confident are you in your organization's ability to assess an employee's potential beyond what you see on a resume?
good one. I was thinking about this, Andrew, when you're looking at it from, the Eightfold client perspective, how are clients, digging beyond the surface of looking at, resumes and job descriptions to understand the skills potential of their workforce?
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, if you're looking at your workforce, Eightfold has the ability based on publicly available data, but also based on employees completing their profiles to be able to provide a lens into what kind of skills do you have in your organization. You can take a look at that lens broadly. You can take a look at it by your job families or your different business organizations. It's just a great, very dynamic way to understand what skills you have. And if you want to talk about looking beyond the resume, that's a great way to capture this and the ability to capture. I'll share with you in a minute, like what is their potential to learn a new skill, and really consider that in considering them for different types of roles. So let's take a quick look at the responses here. We have a confident group. That's fantastic.
Yeah, that's good.
Largest grouping is around somewhat confident in assessing employees' potential. The next group is in the middle, neither confident or doubtful, and then third is doubtful. So I think that's a interesting distribution of responses. I think there's a good amount of confidence. And a lot of kind of oftentimes evaluating kind of your workforce's capabilities or potential. We're seeing a lot of organizations is oftentimes done manually. And I think if you've got kind of the ability to be more agile in that and dynamic in that, within a platform, it really unlocks your ability to really see this and also drive the upskilling. Okay.
Yeah, so I know there's a question in here about tying it to development and learning. So we're going to talk about that in a second here as well. But finding and retaining talent is more and more difficult. It's I love this idea. This point, I say it oftentimes with clients that talent is hiding in plain sight.
Mhm.
Over one third of employees have skills that are not clear from their resumes, and um, I think that untapped potential is hiding right inside the organization because listen, I've been in my career for almost 30 years. What I was doing 20 years ago, do I even well, first of all, do I even remember? But there are things that I was doing early on in my consulting career which have experience that I could really hone or I could refresh. Or there may be skills that are not understood by the employees or within the HR organization. Over one third of employees have skills that are not, they're not clear on their resumes. They may not be clear from their profiles, and that may limit their exposure to additional development or mobility opportunities. And so what we're really seeing is this need for understanding the skill, and then um, that ultimately provides, when we have that at the core, that gives the areas to mobility, to development, to acquisition, um, to retirement in many ways too. So that piece, I'm oftentimes telling clients that we're sitting on the skills that may be in the organization. And so instead of spending the money on acquisition and onboarding, which we all know is a costly process, right? Finding those skills and upskilling internally is often better for the organization, enhances the development of the individual, and also the overall culture and behavior of the organization.
Great.
I think Andrea, it'd be good from your perspective. I know talent intelligence is extremely powerful. For Eightfold, how is Eightfold enabling organizations to widen the aperture of the talent pools?
Yeah. So, perfect segue. That wasn't
Mhm.
a planned segue either. But I want to show you kind of how intelligence kind of gives a lens into understanding a broader population that could be a good fit for a role, especially in this environment, as you and I were just talking about, Anthony, where every company happens to be competing for the same skills right now. So here's the example here. Let me just talk about this page for a second because there's a lot on this page. If you look at the box on the left, in the dark boxes, what you see are some of the high demand skills out there, right? Agile methodologies, financial analysis, Python is a very common language skill that's being sought after right now. And Eightfold has such a depth of data, we can understand what skills individuals have before they learn a new skill, right? So as I said, we have the equivalent of half the world's workforce worth of data. So we also see movement between roles and how skills are acquired. So we call these adjacent skills. So for example, if you look at Python, looking at our data and our analysis, we see adjacent skills with C++, Java, R as an example. If you know those programming languages, the chances are you can pick up Python pretty easily if you don't already have a foot in the door, right? In learning Python, that's probably likely. But you can also take a look at agile methodologies, just a different skill. You can see if you've got experience with Scrum, user-centered design, continuous integration, your ability to learn agile methodologies is very high, right? So what Eightfold has been able to do is talk about potential to learn a new skill, and we've made it scientific based on the data that we have. And so what happens with that, and a lot of this is intuitive, right? It's intuitive. It's just that we actually have the data. So we can do this for all skills. And so the power of this, if you look on the right, right, is if you take a look at Python, if you consider all these other adjacent skills, you're able to increase your population of talent by 3 times, right? So that means if you include someone who has Java, R, C++ as a programming language, you'll find a lot more candidates to bring in, and they are very likely to be able to either learn Python, have already started to learn Python. And so that's really powerful, right? Because it allows your recruiters to expand their pool. It allows HR to look at employee base and see who has these adjacent skills. Where can we focus on upskilling within our organization? What is the potential to grow this skill within our organization? And you can see, for example, if you look at risk management, if you consider all the adjacent skills, you can increase your pool of talent by 5.5 times. So really great intelligence to leverage if you really are competing for the same skills that everybody else is competing, and you want to know where to upskill in your organization or how to even broaden your external pool if you're looking at candidates externally.
Mhm.
So to answer your question, this is a great way to widen your aperture, but do it in a scientific way and find individuals that have a high likelihood of being able to learn that skill pretty easily and quickly, and probably on a path to do that in any case. Okay.
And I think just to that point, the I think a couple of you were asking this question about, so how does this then, the linkage into culture, organization, strategy, right? So when you look at this, skills-based organizations require constant coordination of your learning, strategy, culture, organization, as each need to be in sync to deliver that employee experience. So once you have an understanding of the skills that are required, right? That's what that can then be translated into, using the information that Andrea was just talking about. That's a great way to enable the speed to skill. So those adjacencies, someone that has a skill in a certain area can develop in another. So seeing that adjacency is one. So looking at the talent matching, the skills matching, and then making recommendations around development, and doing that in a proactive way. Two can be, self-guided development. So offering different types of upskilling programs, whether they through distant learning, through other digital venues, through snackable bite-sized content, or through accreditation and certified learning content. So all of those together, that will then look at the prioritization of the adjacent skills where I can develop other critical skills faster, looking at the skills that are a gap in that are critical skills within the organization, to offer those proactively to those individuals, and then tying the culture so that leaders, right? We all know culture is not about placards or mugs and say, our culture is great. It's about the way in which work gets done around here and how leaders are tying what they're prioritizing, their behaviors, to those actions. And so, having a culture that supports learning, development, upskilling, and investing in that in individuals, it's something that we see. The rate of return is so high because we're increasing the engagement of the employee population, which we all know drives productivity, and thus creating a better, more seamless employee experience for the workforce. So that point, sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, just here, the next piece, just on that culture, that's the point I wanted to make as a culture of continuous learning here. That's a really important point. Shaping the culture that supports learning begins with a pulse check, right, of your learning goals and objectives by gathering your leaders and your learning and development professionals to really understand what's happening. Looking at those, the data objectively, so no good or bad idea, defining the future state of learning across the organization, so how you can drive learning. So not everything has to be, go away for a week accreditation or a couple days. Some things can be delivered in a digital content. We're all walking around with our own personal computers, with our phones. Now with people who are returning to offices, having commutes again, vodcast, podcasts, snackable content, all are great, options to offer upskilling opportunities. And then, identifying the key cultural traits. What do we need leaders to do to map to the behaviors that we want them to lead with that match what we're hearing from the workforce? So aligning those. And determining, who your change influencers are, within the organization, and having a plan to use them, right? Citizen-led activation, how they can really scale those behaviors. So I think overall, when I guess now we spent the last 52 minutes talking about the role of employee experience plays when making the shift to a skills-based organization. But maybe Andrew, we can end on this last slide here about where can HR leaders really start. And so I'll just call out a few points here that I know are important for me. The number one, defining the employee experience. Like, we know that today, employee experience is the new people strategy, and employee experience drives engagement, productivity, and performance of the organization. So, what are the skills in the work? What's the culture? What's the workspace, workplace to support them, and what are the type of holistic rewards we can offer to the workforce to enable it? It's not a one size fits all anymore. So really defining that employee experience, that's one to start. The second is about listening, pulsing, listening, doing active listening within the organization. We deploy many of our tools into client organizations to help them gather quickly insights as to what employees need. Then that point about fostering a culture of continuous learning, making sure that leaders really are prioritizing learning and upskilling, and that we're putting our investment towards upskilling, overall. And then, really, I'd say 7 and 9 to me always go together. Prioritize well-being, mental health, and embracing diversity, equity, and inclusion. Those are places where I think if all of these are areas to start, these are ones where I would say I double click into. Andrew, what would you add to that as well?
I love this. This is a great list. I think I would talk about like a theme that I think runs throughout all this is empowering your employees, right? To make decisions for themselves along the lines of many of these things, around shaping their goals, around kind of their needs for well-being, mental health, obviously, and learning is really important to kind of really be shaped, as my example earlier, is really important. And even kind of diversity, equity, inclusion, just making sure kind of there is kind of that transparency and empowerment at the employee level. So I feel like it's a theme that runs through all of these that's really important. And to empower them requires transparency, visibility, and giving them the tools that allow them to drive kind of and shape, how they consume what they need. Yeah, this is a great summary. So, okay.
So the other questions that we haven't answered, I think we've so far, some of them we have.
Yeah, so here we are in Q&A. So let's see, if I take a look, I'm going to just go back and look at questions. So I have a question here about how does Eightfold partner with companies to identify critical skills for business priorities? And so a lot of the work that we're doing with our customers now is taking a look at the critical job families, right, in their organization. A lot of companies are looking across all their job families, actually. And what I think is important intelligence that you should want and look for is marketplace trends. So if you look at your competitors or your benchmark companies you want to look at, understanding what's happening with similar roles or job families in kind of this group of competitors gives you great insights to understand, like, am I on track? Am I behind? And is it okay for me to be behind because I've got a different set of strategies? But just understanding that intelligence helps you really make sure, like, how am I comparing versus my competitors, and what steps, should I be taking if I'm behind and it really matters for my business strategy? Or if I'm behind, it doesn't matter for our business strategy. It's just good to be aware of that. So I think that's one of the important things to bring to the table to really shape your priorities, is understand the marketplace and the trends. Let's continue to look.
Okay, so I know there was another one about, just looking at, sorry, I went down to the bottom. I didn't want to miss any of the ones Um, yeah, I will say there was a question here about employees more likely to leave an organization after the organization has provided transferable skills. Um, I don't have a crystal ball into the future, but I will tell you for organizations that are offering upskilling, particularly around critical skills, and that's woven into the culture, we're seeing retention rates and attraction rates much higher into those organizations than we were previously.
Yeah. I think I would just add to that, Anthony, too, that that's great to see that outcome. Obviously, that's kind of where you're measuring exactly the outcomes, which is important. But I also think that learning is connected with mobility. And so mobility, if you help your employees move within your company, is going to more likely get them to stay, because if they can't move internally, they will look externally. I mean, I think we all witnessed that over the past few years with so many resignations. So having that mobility internally is really important, and upskilling is part of that.
There was a question about hiring managers to train their new hires to enhance their new skills. I mean, the hiring manager, the supervisor is, critical into this process. I think there has to be a learning culture and a, connection with the broader learning and development. Certainly hiring managers have the opportunity to influence the experience, the lived experience that people have, and the experiences of how they're applying those skills. There may be some on the job and technical skills that hiring managers can also be a part of. So I think it's a critical part.
Hey, Anthony, here's a question for you. How much time a day or in a month would you say should be devoted to upskilling your current employee base?
So, it's a question I get asked this question all the time. I do think there should be at least 1 day per month that the employee base has dedicated towards upskilling and development. That said, there are areas where that changes and goes up to a day to half a day to a day a week, depending on the criticality and where we're transitioning the workforce. So that could be in places, the technical skills, the digital skills that Andrea was talking about before. Certainly around leadership, where I've spent a lot of my time is around executive leaders and developing, accelerating their development. That oftentimes, that takes more pointed immersion to build out the expertise and the exposure of those leaders, which can come at, again, it can still average out to 12 days out of the years, but that may be more contiguous and focused around immersion to accelerate their development to take on future jobs in the C-suite or ultimately in CEO succession.
Great. I think we're running out of time. I do want to answer one question in 1 minute. This last question that was raised about this seems to be more directed towards more senior professional roles. What about inside sales, customer success, and other non-exempt job families? And I just want to address that because I was sharing earlier on, I wanted to show digital because there's so much competition for digital. But we actually have a lot of customers that are in the manufacturing industry or have the majority of their workforce in non-exempt roles. Also very important, right? The upskilling, there's even transformation happening in those roles in terms of new methods of manufacturing. And so upskilling and mobility remains an important factor there. We're working with a lot of companies in retail and manufacturing and healthcare that are not these senior professional roles, that this plays equally an important role in. Actually, there's been a lot of pain with hourly workers and non-exempt job families most recently. So definitely a lot of activity in that space too. I just wanted to use the example of digital because that was very relatable, I think, across all industries. Unfortunately, so many questions, great questions too. We're out of time. So I just want to thank you, Anthony. I really enjoyed this conversation. I would love to have future conversations with you because I think this was really a rich discussion, seeing the research.
Yeah, no, it was great. Thank you, for sharing the data. I think, what Eightfold has is really unique, and the data and the access that your team has really helps bring together the insight and the advice that we're giving to our clients as they navigate this uncharted territory. But thank you all for joining us today. Hopefully this was useful. Thank you to our SHRM hosts for having us, and look forward to seeing you on future sessions.
Great.